I'm Joy Pullmann. Welcome to another episode of the Federalist Radio Hour. Here with me today is someone I've been reading for a long time. His name is Renn. He is the publisher of the Masculinist newsletter, which you can find online at themasculinist.com. It's spelled just like it said. Renn, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Renn, you and I were just discussing before the show how it's been kind of a while before you've joined the Federalist podcast, and you're doing a kind of a new and fresh direction in your life. A lot of things going on here with the Masculinist. So, would you, for a lot of our many listeners, can you do kind of an introduction to yourself, who you are as a person, kind of where you came from, and how you ended up doing this new project that we're going to be talking about, the Masculinist?
Great. Well, I've essentially had three careers that I've gone through. When I graduated from college, I spent a long time working in corporate consulting, mostly technology consulting. And then via a blog that I started called the Urbanophile, the Lover of Cities, ended up reinventing myself a little bit by accident as someone who was a student of cities and a writer about cities, particularly the overlooked cities, the American heartland, the American Midwest. And so, in essence, I was looking at a lot of Rust Belt places before it was cool to look at Rust Belt places, and I really felt like there was not a lot of indigenous R&D there. There weren't a lot of ideas about how these cities could be prosperous that didn't
Uh,
involve, be more like Manhattan, be more like Portland, et cetera.
right.
So I did that for, essentially a decade, and I still do some of it today. Ended up working at the Manhattan Institute for 5 years as a senior fellow there and contributing editor at City Journal, which was great experience, great institute. And then a few years ago, I took on another sort of side project that has blossomed, which is a focus on what I call, Christianity, masculinity in the modern world. And it started from a couple of problems that I observed. One was in these Rust Belt cities, there's been a lot of talk about deaths of despair, right? And
Mm,
all of the social problems that you see
right.
there. And in many cases, we talk about the economy of these places and what we need to do to revive the economy of these Rust Belt places or these left behind places. And there is an economic dimension to the problem, but there's also a spiritual dimension to the
Right.
problem. And I felt like I wanted to engage upstream of some
Mhm.
of the economic issues. Also, I saw that really men were not particularly attracted to church, which has been written about a lot. There was a book back about a decade or so ago called "Why Men Hate Going to Church," and there's been a number of them in this theme. And yet, in about 5 years ago, we saw this mass rise of these internet men's gurus. Jordan Peterson
Mm,
obviously was the biggest one. I started following him when he was getting 200,000 views on, lectures, 2-hour lectures about
right.
Genesis. He's doing like these series of podcasts about the beginning of Genesis, like
Right.
several of them 2 hours long, hundreds of thousands of people watching these things. And I'm like, what is going on? But there's also Joe Rogan. If you remember, Milo Yiannopoulos had a massive following of young
Yeah.
college students. A lot of the, everybody from, some legit figures like Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan to, the pickup artists, on to the other thing. And there are a ton of these men's gurus out there, some with
Mm,
millions of followers, some with hundreds of thousands, some with tens of thousands. But I'm like, why is the church not appealing to men? And so I wanted to come into that space and really try to speak to two audiences. One would be the pastors of these churches, the religious leaders, and equip them with thinking about try to correct some of the thinking that was off base about men. And secondly, was to try to reach some of the men themselves and help them think about how to structure their lives and be better
mhm.
in the modern world. So I do write from a Christian perspective. I would call it a Christian ministry, if you will, but it's more of a cultural criticism genre. I'm not a Bible teacher or anything like that. So it would be similar to what some of these other guys are doing, although hopefully from a more moral framework.
Right. You're not really well, actually you do give men advice about, how to be attractive to women, but it's not basically to how to be a sleazeball and rack up,
Right.
bed counts. It's how
Right.
to
Well, I
be a
mean,
real man, and to be a responsible person who contributes to the world and earns his success, and
right.
that gets,
Right.
his stature from something real rather than that
Right.
was a predator, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I started that part of it. I think that's a very good topic because so many things that these pastors will tell you about what women want simply aren't true. Right? They just aren't. And because of
Because
that, I realized,
this for a really long time, but I don't know. I feel like I must be the one weird woman who really has always been attracted to character. When we got married, I really picked my husband. We were penniless. We were right out of college. We had college debt. So my husband didn't have any money that I was marrying him for. Because you talk about how women find, and I don't think there's anything wrong with. I think there's something wrong with like gold digging, but there's nothing wrong with assessing whether a man can financially provide for you as you are devoting so much energy to a baby. You can't grow a baby and really hold down a full-time job at the same time without help. I mean,
right.
ask me how I know. Anyway, so I would, say, okay, I get that, I like muscles. My husband works out. That's awesome. I like manliness. But I've always looked for character, and he's like, yeah, anyway. So in your discussion of that, we have lots of in-home husband and wife
Oh,
conversations about the content that you put out. But I actually think I'm not the typical female consumer.
well,
And
I
there's, yeah, go ahead.
well, what I would say is character is very important. I think what people mistake is they conflate two things. There's two different kinds of things. One, what makes someone a high quality, marriage eligible person, the kind of person you would want to marry.
Right.
Um, you want someone who does have high character, right? Who is conscientious, who is all of these things, who is godly, who does have, compatible
But
theological
I
beliefs.
would think of someone like someone
Yeah,
who's reliable, who doesn't flake out
right,
on me, who I can lean on,
right.
who supports me. Yeah.
Yeah, all those things are super, super important.
Kind to
But
me.
but as they say, it's necessary but not sufficient
Right.
because those things don't make you attractive to other people.
Yeah.
What makes you attractive are a completely different set. So it's like there could be someone that I see, it's like, wow, that's like a really attractive woman, but it doesn't mean that I necessarily want to marry her. Vice versa. There could be someone
Yeah.
that you really want to marry. And so,
My
Jordan
husband and his
Peterson,
buddies have a test for this called, I forget how it's like the Pepto Bismol pink test. She's everything you want, except for, whatever the case is. And so it's kind of like maybe she's crazy hot, but she's also crazy, so don't touch her.
yeah, Jordan Peterson, one of the reasons that he had so many men follow him is because he would say some of these simple truths that other people weren't saying. One of the lines from his book
That's true.
was something along the lines of girls are attracted to boys who win status competitions with other boys. Right.
Absolutely.
So the captain of the football team,
Yeah.
the musician who's very popular, the student body president, the
Yeah.
people who achieve.
Someone
Right?
who's
Right.
yeah.
And so you have to be competent, you have to be accomplished, you have to be working to achieve in the world
Yeah.
as something that generates attraction. Actually think just, simply money is it's a factor, especially if you have a lot of it. But it's kind of at the bottom. It's actually somewhat at the bottom of the list. But these other factors around, I think again, think about the captain of the football team, right? That's the person that people are really attracted. Men are, want to follow that person, right?
Yeah.
Women want to be attracted to that person. So I think that is understanding those dynamics, and Peterson really did a good job of sort of, unpacking some of that for people. And I think a lot of the people in church sort of missed that element of it, and they sort of just said what you really need to be is, a really nice guy, and
Yeah.
essentially, to sum
I
it
mean,
up.
yeah. And I talked to, I talked to, so I happen to be married, but I'm an older millennial, and many of my peers and my siblings and their friends are not married yet because that's the culture we're in now. And so, of course, I talk to them about their boyfriends and so forth. And, girl, there are so many young women who are dating some guy and they just can't really figure out why they're so uneasy about the prospect of marrying him, but they don't have any other options. And I think it's absolutely related to what you're talking about here because he's a nice guy, so he's not doing drugs. He doesn't beat them. He's not having children with, he's not a horrible person, but like not being a horrible person is really not, that's like, that should be a baseline assumption. And the women are going, okay, but like, where's the other thing? Where is like I mean, how, are you doing something that's kind of dangerous? And I don't mean, again, dangerous and stupid like being in a gang, but I mean, I don't know. Do you work high on roofs, and you're up there, you're tied to it while you're, working on a, I don't, a skyscraper or whatever. Like that's really attractive because he's confident, he's doing a tangible, confident thing that's difficult. And, anyway, or just a nice guy who sits on the couch watching Netflix really isn't attractive to women, but that's like
Right.
that's about the best most of them get nowadays.
Yeah. You know what I always tell men is, and I'd say the same thing to women. I got some criticism over the article I wrote for the Federalist about this topic because people said you're treating this like a calculation instead of like an organic thing.
Mm,
That relationships should just kind of come together naturally, and there's certainly an organic component to any human relationship,
yeah.
right? However, when you think about it, do you just treat that your job, your career that way? Do you treat getting,
Oh,
into the right college that way?
I say that
Do
all
you
the time
treat
to
any
women.
other,
Yeah.
in any other domain of life, we realize, hey, if I want to get into the career I want, I have to be working hard to
Discipline.
get into the right college. I'm
Yeah.
looking at like, what does it take
Go
to
in a
get in?
direction. Work hard at it.
Work
Yeah.
hard, focus. It
Expect it to
requires,
take a long time.
right.
Yeah.
It takes today focus and intentionality in all of your human relationships, but especially your, boyfriend, girlfriend, or marriage relationship.
Hmm.
It's not, it's not like the post World War II era where a lot of this stuff just did happen naturally and organically, and all the structures kind of put you there. Today, it's very easy for someone who says, "Yes, I would like to be married, I would like to have kids," to all of a sudden
But now what?
wake up one day, you're 37 or you're
Yeah.
43 and like, "What just happened?" And it
Yeah.
didn't happen. And we would never take this organic, we're just gonna let things happen. We're not gonna really have intentionality about other domains of life. We have to work on
Hmm.
being the person that a man or a woman wants to be with and finding the person
Hmm.
that we want to be with. And so this world, one of the things I tell people, and I think that a lot of these, especially these baby boomer ministers, don't really get, is the degree of difficulty setting on life has gone up,
Oh,
right?
so much.
For it's gone up for younger people today. I'm not old yet, but I'm not exactly young. I'm Generation X,
Hmm.
and you know, I think about how the competitiveness of getting into college when I went to college, it was competitive to get into some colleges and programs. It's way more competitive today.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have perfect GPA, perfect SAT scores, and not get into top universities.
Right.
So the strategery and the gaming and everything you have to do to like know it, it's so much more difficult than it was. That's true in relationships. It's true in so many aspects of life today. And as a result, I don't think that people get some of these people who kind of came of age in a different era fully get it. You know,
Well,
oh, but the baby
there were
boomer could
life
pay.
scripts that were culturally
Yeah,
available to boomers in their 20s that are simply exploded now. In fact, the boomers helped explode
yeah,
them. you
exactly.
know,
They
so
could
that
work a summer job and go to
yeah,
college with summer
yeah,
job money. I'll,
yeah.
I'll work my way through school. What are you kids today borrowing all this money? Well, yeah, but it wasn't like $15,000 a year
But
at State
decided that
U.
everyone should go to college, and that means the price of college is completely inflated 500% almost.
Right. And for them, you didn't even necessarily, even for the baby boomers, you did not necessarily need a college degree
Right,
to become successful in a corporate job.
right.
You could get in an entry level position and work your way up in corporate America. My stepmother, she started out as a teller at age 17 in a little
Hmm.
savings and loan. And by the time she retired, she was the executive vice president in
Yep,
charge of
my
mortgage lending for
uncle
the biggest
and aunt.
banks in Kentucky. Never got a college degree. You could
Yep.
never do that today. And so
No.
the credentialing is so much higher, and the expectations are so much higher today that I think that's where some of the frustration of the boomers come in. Is they I think it's an unfairness because they had some hard things. Nobody of our generations had to go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
They weren't drafted to go to Vietnam. They didn't go through stagflation in
Yeah.
the 70s. There's some things they
Well, and
went
my
through,
husband talk about
but
material comforts. The average starter house, that a boomer bought was, 800 square, 900 square feet.
right,
our starter house that we bought that was considered really small, 1,200 square feet, our first one that, and the average house size today is, I think it's almost 2,000 square feet, but so yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
things,
I would just say though, once it hit about 1983, things really took off for the boomers, and there was like a 20-year run, and they really did do extremely, extremely well. And following the scripts mostly worked out for them. It just doesn't necessarily work out for younger people today. You can do everything right and still end
yeah,
up to your eyeballs in debt and not having a great job at the end of the day, and
and
not end
life
up during your
childless and 40.
right, right,
Which is
y-
kind of all those things together are a lot of the source of a lot of like discontent, anger that we're seeing, and it's having a toll on people, personally in their personal lives. And it also is, I think, a lot of that's being translated into politics, and that's partly because, as you talked about earlier, if I mean we have, I mean the churchedness of people, a place that you get your frustrations resolved and you get in touch with the transcendent, and you basically work, almost, I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm a Christian, so I think that church is a lot more than therapy, but it
right.
also has a therapeutic, communal, supportive aspect that is really incalculable, and that only a quarter of Americans now really have. It's about a quarter of Americans who regularly go to church, 20-25%. Used to be 50-70%, depending on the area you're talking about. And so, if